Today from the global lane, friend to terrorists, the wealthy Gulf country pouring billions of dollars into the U.S., gaining influence in Washington and the Middle East.
Qatar is an Islamist ideological emirate that seeks in every single step of its activities to promote jihad.
On the home front, the Council on American Islamic Relations, an unindicted co-conspirator with alleged ties to Hamas. Now a U.S. senator wants the IRS to investigate.
This is an organization that very much needs to be exposed, investigated, and shut down.
The elusive American dream. High interest rates prevent Gen Zers and others from purchasing homes. A look at the cities with the most affordable neighborhoods and what to expect in the days ahead.
Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Kansas City, these sorts of cities, mainly in the middle of the country, some toward the south, the southeast, would be considered the most affordable.
Christians arrested, and an outspoken critic of the Nicaraguan government dies mysteriously in prison. It's time to get tough with the Ortegas. And it's all right here on the global lane. Influencing American Middle East policy. The wealthy Gulf country of Qatar and here in the U.S., the Council on American Islamic Relations are engaged in spreading extremist Islamic ideology. Qatar helps fund and support jihadist movements, while CAIR has been accused of connections to the Hamas terror group. First, Dale Hurd brings us a look at how Qatar is spending billions of dollars to buy influence in Washington.
You might think, based on the warm relationship between Washington and Qatar, that this wealthy Gulf nation, awash in natural gas, is an outpost of democracy. After all, the country hosts the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. It will also be the home to a new Trump International Golf Course and has given the White House a $400 million 747 jetliner. However, Qatar is basically a kingdom, and according to critics, no defender of Western values.
Qatar is the opposite of all that. Qatar is an Islamist ideological emirate that seeks in every single step of its activities to promote jihad.
Yugal Carmon leads the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI, and he says Qatar is a hub of Muslim extremism and a major source of international terrorism.
They do it in what you would call, on the one hand, soft power, using their immense wealth, but also by hard power, by supporting every jihadist movement on the face of the planet.
The laundry list is a long one. The mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was a Qatari government employee. Qatar has long sponsored the Muslim Brotherhood, which seeks a worldwide Islamic government. Qatar finances and hosts Hamas and has backed Palestinian terrorism. It has strong ties with Iran and the Taliban, and it broadcasts anti-Semitism and lies about Israel as well as anti-American propaganda through its global TV channel Al Jazeera. There have also been reports Qatar funds terrorists in Africa who kill Christians. On October 7th, Qatar blamed Israel for the Hamas massacre. And when Israel killed the mastermind behind the attack, Yahya Sinwar, the mother of Qatar's emir, in a now deleted post on X, wrote that Sinwar will live on and Israel will be gone. An Islamic nation that hates Israel and supports terrorism might not sound surprising, but Qatari influence runs deep in Washington and within the Trump administration. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff, and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin have either lobbied for Qatar, worked for firms that did, or had a business relationship with the emirate. Last month, former Education Secretary Bill Bennett also registered as a lobbyist for Qatar. His stated role will be to say that the $6 billion Qatar has given to U.S. higher education is not for the purpose of spreading Islamic radicalism. Qatar has spent almost $100 billion to curry favor with the White House, Congress, academia, think tanks, and corporations. It also bought influence in previous administrations. When asked about the 747 being given to the U.S. by Qatar, President Trump suggested he'd be stupid to turn down a free, very expensive airplane. But if nothing is free in geopolitics, the price of the plane and the billions being dumped on Washington is more Qatari influence. As the tiny emirate, which sees itself as the true seat of radical Islam, hopes to leverage its close relationship with the United States.
Dale Hurd is here with more. Dale, with all this Qatari money floating into the U.S., you said nearly $100 billion. What is Qatar wanting in return?
Well, they're obviously buying influence. They want a place at the table. They're playing both sides. Look at them, view them as a double agent because they have ties with Iran. They have ties with terror groups. They also want to be strapped to Washington's waist. They've given us the largest base in the Middle East there. Look at it as a balanced portfolio. They're trying to mitigate the risks from both sides. But I didn't want with this piece to bash the Trump administration per se, but people need to be aware that Qatar is not Switzerland. I mean, they have got their fingers in some bad stuff and they have access to the White House.
I'm sure the U.S. officials receiving Qatari funds or connected to firms that receive funds would say it's the other way around. The relationship is securing U.S. influence over Qatar and the Hamas negotiations, etc. So is that true, or is Qatar playing the Trump administration and members of Congress?
You know, Yigal Carmon, who was in the story, the head of memory, after the interview, he said, Dale, the U.S. is so... You people are so good, you're so nice, you can't imagine that there's a nation out there that is lying to you. But they do seek the destruction of Israel. They do fund Hamas. They did have a role in October 7th. They do host the Muslim Brotherhood. And we have the Emir Thani, the leader of Qatar, bragging that not the Saudis, but they're the true heirs of the Wahhabis. They come from the Wahhabi line. Well, the Wahhabi ideology, as we know, was the inspiration for 9/11, for the Islamic State, and for terrorism acts around the world. So they're not to be taken lightly.
Okay, very revealing. Dale Hurd, stay where you are. We'll be right back with you. The U.S. stock market jumped nearly 900 points when Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell suggested he may lower interest rates next month. That would make mortgages a little bit more affordable. However, the American dream remains out of reach for many people, especially those from Generation Z. Here to fill us in on the least and most affordable U.S. cities for housing is Sam Borghi, finance analyst, researcher at Investors Observer. Sam, it's good to talk with you. So I'm assuming New York, metropolitan Washington, D.C., San Francisco, they're probably the highest cost housing cities, correct? And are there any surprises on the list of cities with the least affordable housing?
No, you're absolutely correct. Those cities continuously rank as the most unaffordable in the country. You mainly have the West Coast and the Northeast and parts of the East Coast being the most unaffordable. We wanted to dig in a little bit deeper and not just look at just the average house price in those areas. We wanted to look at what percentage of neighborhoods were considered unaffordable. So in places like Los Angeles, for example, 97% of the neighborhoods in that city are considered unaffordable when you compare monthly mortgage payments as a percentage of a household income. So anywhere from LA down to Las Vegas, you have anywhere from 74% to 97% of neighborhoods in those cities are considered unaffordable. So it's gotten a lot worse over the last year, even as real wage growth hasn't really kept up with housing costs. And that's what we're seeing mainly across the whole country, but it's mostly pronounced in those coastal cities and in the Northeast as well.
Sam, before we get to the most affordable cities or neighborhoods, why has the cost of housing shot up so much in recent years? It seems after the COVID pandemic that housing went through the roof. Must be more than high interest rates, or is it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So what we saw during COVID was they drastically lowered interest rates. And so conventional wisdom would say, well, if interest rates are lower, that means housing is more affordable. That's only partly true. When you lower interest rates, you jack up demand for housing. And as demand goes up, prices go up. That's what we saw during the pandemic. Now, fast forward to today, interest rates are above 6% on the mortgage side. The average mortgage rate is over 6%. The problem is that existing homeowners, they're not selling. So supply is constricted, which means that the available homes on the market are priced much higher. So that's what we're seeing right now. The existing home housing market is actually becoming more expensive than the new builds, which is really not something that is very intuitive to most of us. Usually new homes, they have new features, they're bigger, they're newer, they cost more. What we have now, because of the supply issue on the existing housing front, existing homes are now more expensive. So people really can't catch a break. If you're not in the housing market, it's becoming a lot harder to get into it.
And which cities are the most affordable those Americans should consider moving to if they want to buy a more affordable house?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of the cities I think would really cluster around the Midwest area, especially. So Louisville, for example, is considered the most affordable because only 7% of its neighborhoods fall into the unaffordable bracket. Atlanta, Georgia, as one of the big cities, is considered one of the most affordable because 17% of its neighborhoods would fall into that unaffordable bracket. So you have cities across the Midwest. You have, Missouri, some in Michigan, North Carolina, Cincinnati, Ohio is also up there, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Kansas City. These sorts of cities, mainly in the middle of the country, some toward the south, the southeast, would be considered the most affordable. So a lot of those trends we already know, but we wanted to kind of dissect the percentage of the neighborhoods, and that's kind of mirrors what we see from broader affordability trends as well.
How do jobs and industry play into that? Because I know a lot of that, which you mentioned, is Rust Belt. So obviously the neighborhoods would be more affordable, but you can't get a job.
Exactly. And that's a good example because, Washington, for example, it has one of the highest incomes in the country when you look at median married couple income. So when you take a look at that, that makes it more affordable because there's a lot of jobs in that area, government jobs. You go to the Rust Belt, for example, it's still reeling from the after effects of the manufacturing downturn. So housing is much more affordable in those areas, but it's very less likely for you to be able to find work. So that's kind of the trade-off. We saw a lot of people during the pandemic, if they have remote jobs, they would move to areas that are more affordable. Those who still have that opportunity might want to consider some of the spots in the Midwest as being more affordable if they want to put down roots and buy a home.
And finally, what impact do you think lower interest rates will have on the housing market? We're probably not going to see a return to the more affordable housing levels of the pre-COVID crisis, or will we?
I don't believe we will. I mean, I think right now you have mortgage rates above 6%. I think when the Fed starts to lower interest rates and the knock on that effect has on mortgages, I think you will see rates decline. But what we've seen time and time again is when that happens, demand goes up, because Americans still view housing as a major vehicle for wealth creation. So anytime rates are more affordable, you'll start to see more activity. You'll start to see maybe more people putting up their homes for sale, realizing that equity that they built up in the home and the gains that they've seen on the property valuations, and they'll buy a new home. So I think ultimately, based on the trends that we've seen, lower rates might make it more affordable if you're entering the market, but you're also going to be contending with higher prices as well, as there's going to be more activity and more demand coming back into the market.
Okay, for now, go to the Midwest, young man and woman. Sam Borghi, finance analyst, researcher, Investors Observe. Thank you for sharing those insights. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Now to the home front and Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He wants the Internal Revenue Service to investigate the Council on American Islamic Relations. Cotton believes CAIR should be stripped of its tax-exempt status because of its alleged ties to terrorism.
In a letter to IRS Commissioner Billy Long, Senator Tom Cotton maintains that CAIR does not deserve a 501c3 tax-exempt status because of what he called long-standing evidence connecting it to terrorism. One of the organization's biggest critics, Muslim terrorism expert Robert Spencer, agrees.
Finally, this is something that should have been done many years ago. This is an organization that very much needs to be exposed, investigated, and shut down.
The U.S. government listed it as an unindicted co-conspirator in the 2008 conviction of the Holy Land Foundation for providing Hamas millions of dollars. In 2004, CAIR sued Navy veteran Andrew Whitehead for defamation after he posted online that CAIR is a terrorist supporting front organization. CAIR is an organization founded by Hamas supporters which seeks to overthrow the constitutional government of the United States and replace it with an Islamist theocracy, and CAIR has proven links to and was founded by Islamic terrorists. Ultimately, CAIR settled out of court and the statements were allowed to remain online. Attorney Reed Rubenstein represented Whitehead.
They decided these statements were no longer either false or defamatory.
CAIR was founded by Nihad Awad and Omar Ahmed out of the Islamic Association for Palestine, which ultimately was shut down for being a Hamas front.
CAIR founder Ahmad was quoted in a 1998 news article as saying that Islam isn't in America to be equal to any other faith, but to become dominant. The Quran should be the highest authority in America. After the October 7th Hamas massacre, this video showed CAIR National Executive Director Nihad Awad saying he was happy to see Palestinians breaking the siege and throwing down the shackles of their own land. Awad's comments caused the Biden White House to cut ties with the group.
They have gained so much influence, power, and access in the American government that I think Nihad Awad figured he was untouchable. He could say whatever he wanted. He didn't have to worry about any backlash.
We asked CAIR about Awad's statement, and they replied, "We specifically condemned attacks on civilians on October 7th, just as we condemn the ongoing genocide in Gaza." As for Cotton's letter to the IRS, CAIR told us, Tom Cotton's demand that the IRS baselessly target one of America's largest Muslim nonprofit organizations for the benefit of the Israeli government is an un-American political stunt that sets a dangerous precedent for nonprofits of all faiths. Spencer believes the last thing CAIR wants is for the IRS to look into its funding.
If I think the full story of CAIR's funding were told, we would see some surprises in terms of perhaps funding from foreign governments, any number of things.
CAIR says only a small and negligible percentage of donations come from foreign sources.
Dale Hurd is back with more on this. Dale, CAIR's connection to the Holy Land Foundation came out nearly 20 years ago. So does the organization still have questionable ties? Is Cotton right to be concerned?
The connections to terror are kind of old news. I think they should have been investigated, and so they should be investigated. They've never really been looked into because of political correctness. CAIR's kind of shtick now is sowing division by claiming discrimination against Muslims. They're trying to spread support for Hamas and opposition to Israel. That's kind of what they're doing now.
Well, how likely is it that the IRS will investigate then?
You know, I don't know, but I will say this. I've dealt with CAIR over the years, and this is the first time they've ever gotten back to me when I've asked for a quote. And they could just be better organized than they used to be, but something tells me that with Trump in office, they are concerned. And I think they should be, because I think if this IRS investigates them, I think they will lose their tax-exempt status.
Okay, Dale Hurd, two excellent reports people are unlikely to see elsewhere. Thanks for sharing those additional insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary.
The message is clear. Anyone who speaks out against the Sandinista regime in Nicaragua and those perceived as a threat to its leadership will die, be imprisoned, or banished from the country. The latest victim, Mauricio Alonso Prieto, a political activist and the father of the worship leader at La Roca de Nicaragua Church in Jinotepe. The 64-year-old Alonso was one of at least 6 people arrested on July 18th, which included Pastor Palacios Vargas and several of his family members. According to Christian Solidarity Worldwide, the Institute of Forensic Medicine notified Alonso's family of his death on August 25th. No cause of death was provided. Folks, the recent arrests and the unexplained death of Alonso are additional examples of the many atrocities committed by the Sandinista government against Catholics and evangelical Christians in recent years. Daniel Ortega and his wife, Rosario Murillo, co-presidents of the Nicaraguan government, have much to explain. They must be held accountable by the international community. A detailed explanation for the cause of Alonso's passing, given that he was an outspoken critic of the government, must be provided. Pastor Vargas and the others who are now charged with treason for opposing the government must be released immediately from captivity. Irela Guevara of Outreach Aid to the Americas fled Nicaragua in 2018. 2 years ago, she testified before the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, explaining that Nicaraguan Christians have now become targets for giving tithes and offerings to their churches.
If myself as a Christian want to give a contribution to my church, I must know that this act can result in an investigation for alleged terrorism. Evangelical churches operate in the country as NGOs. The moment a pastor or an evangelical leader express themselves in public outside of religious matters, these churches are canceled. The fear of losing their legal status has kept evangelicals in silence in the face of the crisis. So we see that the government's tactics of repression have shifted from accusing the Catholic leaders of terrorist harassment, incarceration, fire, and bombs to fiscal control and permanent surveillance.
The Ortegas are increasingly resembling historical figures like Stalin and Mao. However, political pressure and the threat of economic sanctions have prompted some progress in securing the release of political prisoners. About 1 year ago, the U.S. government successfully negotiated the release of 135 prisoners, including 13 evangelical Christians who were arrested after hosting several government-approved festival events attended by tens of thousands. Additionally, the Nicaraguan government released Catholic Bishop Carlos Alvarez from prison after negotiating his expulsion from the country with the Vatican. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a staunch anti-communist of Cuban-American descent, understands the biblical implications of persecution. He argues that such treatment should not come as a surprise to people of faith.
By definition, Christianity has always been countercultural. Yeah. It was from its earliest days, and it's been at its strongest and most vibrant. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean we seek persecution or we don't take it on. It does, but I think we should understand that in Christ's own command, in Christ's own words, he tells us they're going to hate you because of me. They hated me before they hate you. Yeah.
Consumed by power and money, the Sandinistas truly hate Christ. That's what this is all about. It's time for the Trump administration to take a strong stand against them. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.